The Toronto Blue Jays snapped a rough stretch of play with a huge win today against the Minnesota Twins. It's only May, it's still early in the season, but this felt like the game of the year, and the Blue Jays delivered. It wasn't always pretty, but they got the result that we wanted. So we'll break that down and much more in this episode of Jays Digest. What's up, Jays fans? I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse, and I've been very busy, so shout out to Nick for holding it down these past couple of days. And I know it hasn't been easy, Nick, because the Jays have been on an absolute skid as of late, but they got the win today. They got the result that we've been waiting for. Hopefully this could spark something going forward for them, but it has been a really rough stretch of play. They got the result that we wanted today. It wasn't always pretty along the way. If you look at the box score, you won't be too impressed, but the Jays won 3-1 in Minnesota tonight, and I think this is the start of good things to come.
Yeah, they still have a few things to clean up, which we'll discuss on later in the video. But we got the win. We snapped our couple game losing skip. Before we get in the video, quick reminder: hit the subscribe button. We're super close to 7,000, and I know it's rough right now. The Jays have not been playing well, but today they did play okay. They snapped. Exactly, and that's kind of the goal now. They snapped their losing streak, and again, they only technically a 2-game losing streak because they won game 2 of the Rays series, but we're more so talking about the big skid that they've had, losing 9 of their last 11. They said on the broadcast it's something horrible that we don't even want to touch on the actual number, but they did ultimately win the game today, snapping the losing streak thanks to essentially Bo Bichette in the pitching. But before we get into the box score, Peter, what were your thoughts on today's game? And they still have some things to clean up, which we'll touch on later, but a win's a win at this point.
Yeah, I don't want to focus on the negative aspects at all, but we kind of have to. But they did win tonight. And I think the players only meeting came at a very good time. And this was something that Blair and Barker touched on today on their show. It's very convenient to have a players only meeting the day before a Kevin Gausman start and the day before you play a non-AL East opponent for the first time in what seems like 2 years for the Toronto Blue Jays. I mean, they're finally playing not the Orioles, not the Yankees, not the Red Sox, not the Rays. And if you're ever going to snap a losing streak, it's against the Minnesota Twins or someone in the AL Central with Kevin Gausman going to the mound. And he didn't have his best stuff today, but he still battled. He does what he does every time, and he gives them a chance to win. And I was super impressed with him. He gutted it out, got a lot of strikeouts, a lot of walks, a lot more than Kevin Gausman would be happy with when looking at his stat line. But, man, I'm just so thrilled with this result. And I said it in the intro. I think this was the biggest win of the year thus far for the Blue Jays, and I really do think it'll spark something going forward.
Yeah, again, the players-only meeting, we didn't upload yesterday, but they did have one after yesterday's brutal loss, and like you said, came at a well-needed time, and clearly it did spark him to some degree, as George Springer had a couple hits. Bo Bichette was kind of the hero of today's game with his home run, which I'll show you in a minute. And other than that, obviously, Witt and Kevin Kiermaier continue to do their thing. There's a lot of offers in there. 0 for 4 from Vladdy, 0 for 4 from Chapman. Belt didn't get a hit. Varsho stays ice cold, including the top of the 9-3, grounded into a double play. And he's been a bit concerning as of late. But again, we're going to focus on the positives. And one positive was the early bomb in the top of the 3rd by Bo Bichette off Berland. And he crushed it. It was gone after already, being up by 1 there. It just felt like a well-needed home run. The Jays have not been hitting many home runs as of late at all, and it seems like the Jays have barely even had the lead as of late at all. So having, nonetheless a 3-run lead was a bit comforting, especially when Kevin Gausman's on the hill, and he's kind of the guy you can trust in our ace, which I'll touch on his stat line in the next chapter, but still.
Yeah, but that was the big difference today because they were pitching bad once again. Yeah. They were bad with runners in scoring position for – I believe probably the 15th game in a row, if I'm not mistaken.
Whole season, it seems like.
That was the difference. That was the difference today. It was getting those big hits, those big home runs, and the base running was bad. The hitting with runners in scoring position again didn't come through. But that's what has separated this team for many years before this season. It's their ability to hit home runs and hang with the biggest mashers of the entire league, and that's what the Blue Jays are. They're a feast or famine type of offense, especially with the changes that they made in the offseason. Dalton Varsho, all or nothing type of hitter. They got rid of Teoscar Hernandez, who's a perennial silver slugger candidate in the outfield. So your lineup is naturally going to be a little bit more thin, and you got to hit home runs. They got to get back to what's made them successful in the past. And they got to stick true to their roots, and that's hitting home runs and hitting them in high volume.
And yeah, luckily they did that tonight. Like you said, yeah, there's still a lot of concerning aspects, but we're nitpicking a little bit because of how bad they played recently. At the end of the day, we got a win. And let's touch on the pitching, which was a huge positive, and it's honestly been a fairly big positive even throughout this stretch for the most part. And the bullpen was lights out today. Kevin Gausman, as you saw in the thumbnail, also got it done, but Kevin Gausman went 5 1/3, 4 hits, 5 walks, and 8 strikeouts. And you touched on it. You know, when you're mixing in 5 walks along with 8 strikeouts, your pitch count is going to be through the roof. And he was upwards, very close to 110 pitches. His command wasn't there, but you just see here now, he's our ace, and there's definitely no doubt about it. Even on a game where he has 5 walks, he only lets up 1 run. And huge shout out to Eric Swanson for stranding runners on second and third with 1 out there. But Peter, the bullpen was great today, and I'll let you touch on Nate Pearson. You texted me and finally getting some high leverage situations, and I could not be happier, especially with Jimmy Garcia struggling, and the good call by John Schneider to put Eric Swanson in the highest leverage situation of the game, which ended up being in that 5th inning, 6th inning.
Well, I'm going to pat ourselves on the back here, Nick, because we kind of thought that this was a possibility heading into the season. We didn't know what Nate Pearson's role was going to be heading into the year. He's ultimately started the year in AAA with Buffalo, and he pitched pretty well there, but he had walk issues, and the command wasn't necessarily there, and it hasn't exactly been there for the Toronto Blue Jays either. But when you throw 98, 99, you can get away with a lot more mistakes. And Nate Pearson makes a lot of mistakes. He gets into deep counts. He doesn't have the greatest command of his fastball, but man, he is dominant when he is in that strike zone and he's around the plate. So it's great to see him in high leverage. I do think this is something that is sustainable, and I think it's something that the Jays want to keep trying going forward, because you don't have, apart from Meza, Swanson, and Romano, you don't have that reliable shutdown back end guy. And I think Nate Pearson could go ahead and be that, especially with, like you said, Jimmy Garcia's struggles that he had early on in the season.
Yeah, and it worked out perfectly because they wanted to put in Eric Swanson there in the high leverage situation, which even though it was in the 6th inning, was well needed, especially because Swanson can pitch good against lefties and righties, and there was a lefty then a righty coming up, so it worked out very well, and he ultimately got out of the jam. And like you said, Nate Pearson looked pretty good. He did walk someone, but he has some of the, if not best, raw stuff in that bullpen, and he has the potential to be a high leverage reliever, and it's good for him to get. He's still, fairly young. He could turn into a potential, maybe future closer. I know a lot of people on Twitter are hyping up Nate Pearson future closer, but regardless, he can be a high leverage guy. And shout out to Jordan Romano with a fairly clean 9th inning. And the last thing I wanted today was for us to even remotely give them a chance in the bottom of the 9th, because I don't think I would have been able to take it. But any quick final thoughts?
They did. Yeah. They did, though.
They put the tying run on there with the single. Yeah. I started to get a little nervous, but first pitch pop up. Anything else you want to touch on quickly before we move on to a quick negative before we wrap up?
Yeah, it's just I'm very happy with the result, and that's the bottom line. I still think this team is going to sneak into the playoffs. I think winning the division, that ship has sailed. It sailed probably a week ago after the Yankees series that the Blue Jays had, but it is what it is. All you got to do is get into the playoffs, and that's very evident with the way that the Philadelphia Phillies played last year in October. They won, I believe, 87 games in the regular season. 87 games in the regular season. They backpedaled into the playoffs. They barely got in, and then they got hot once they were there. Nick Castellanos was looking like prime Miguel Cabrera, and that's what you hope for. You got to get into the playoffs and get hot once you get in. So hopefully the Jays could go on a run here and get in and be in the dance in October.
Yeah, still 110 games left there, and I don't know, lots of time left. I do agree that the first place, crazier things have happened though. 2015 was, they snuck into that last first place spot, but the Jays are looking pretty rough, and yeah, we do have a tough stretch ahead now, which we'll touch on here now. We have some huge games coming up, and Peter, we got to buckle in. The schedule is a bit easier for at least this for at least this series. We'll take it series by series, and we really need to win this one against the Twins. And I want to sweep the series. I know it's a bit crazy to think about now, but ultimately we got to take it one game at a time, because me calling for a sweep is a bit crazy, especially after the last couple weeks there. But huge games ahead. And Peter, any quick thoughts on the series ahead before we wrap up and hope for an afternoon win tomorrow?
I mean, yeah, we got to look at the games ahead here. You have Milwaukee. You have a series against Milwaukee after you're done in Minnesota. You got a series against Houston, and then back to Minnesota yet again. So it's not easy. These are tough teams, but the Jays were expected to be one of the top dogs heading into the season. So if you want to be the best, you got to beat the best. And I really do think the Jays can go ahead and grab some momentum. This was a big win. I mean, it didn't look pretty. Some of the guys that were already playing well continue to play well, and the guys that have been struggling have continued to struggle. Not much changed tonight, except that they got the win. And sometimes you got to win ugly, and that's what the Jays did tonight. So you got to win the series against Minnesota. Take it one game at a time. I'm not going to go ahead and ask for the sweep like you, but I'll take 2 out of 3. I'll be thrilled with 2 out of 3.
Yeah, just got to keep winning series, and hopefully we continue to do that, and we'll have continued daily videos for you guys, and hopefully Jays can turn it around and continue to win. But that'll wrap up the video. Make sure to hit subscribe button, and we'll see you tomorrow.